And thank you very much to our panelists as well for making the time to come out tonight. So we have Davina, who is a strategy consultant at Accenture, Meggie, who is a geotechnical engineer at Sweco, and Rowan, who is a deals manager at PwC, and Simon, who is the founder of Legal Sidekick. So instead of me butchering what your job descriptions are, it would be great if you guys could go around and give us a bit of an intro and, in a nutshell, what your current role is. So Meggie, let's start with you.
Okay. So I'm a geotechnical engineer at a multidisciplinary engineering consultancy in Birmingham. And geotechnical engineering is kind of a sub-branch of civil engineering. And we're primarily concerned with the ground and the behaviour of the ground. We use soil and rock mechanics to solve engineering problems and carry out civil engineering design works for big infrastructure projects.
Nice. And Davina, what about you?
So I'm a strategy consultant, which is as fluffy as it sounds, but we basically help clients solve big problems. So it can be anything from they need more capability within their business, they need to save money, they want to enter into a new market, they have a bad culture. So any problem that they have, we have a vast range of experts that can go in and help them solve their problem.
Cool. And Simon, what about you? What is Legal Sidekick?
Well, I suppose my background is that I'm a lawyer. So I trained as a lawyer in a big law firm, and we worked on all sorts of different corporate transactions and finance transactions, advising larger businesses and corporations. And now I've left that business to set up my own project, where we effectively work with smaller businesses and startups and help them start their businesses and set up all the contracts that they need to get started and growing their business. So sometimes that's fundraising, sometimes that's hiring people, sometimes that is their contracts with their customers. So it's generally supporting business founders in getting up and running in their business. And part of it's technology based, so on this platform Legal Sidekick, and then part of it is more personal and advice based, and advising people on the things they're not sure on, or whatever it is that they need help with. Cool,
thanks for that. And Rowan, over to you.
So I work in the transaction services department at PwC, and PwC is a big global professional services firm, which basically means they provide a whole range of different advisory services to pretty big clients. In my role, I work in real estate. So typically I help advise private equity houses or sovereign wealth funds looking to make acquisitions, basically try and give them an understanding of what it is they're buying by doing a deep dive into the financials of the target assets or companies they're looking at. And that can range in size from, I've done something as small as a high net worth individuals buying a mansion in Surrey to a multi-billion-pound portfolio of assets across Eastern Europe and America and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, quite a broad range, but mainly focusing on multinational transactions, that kind of thing.
Nice, thank you guys. So 4 very different roles, and I'm keen to know what your journeys to sort of falling into those roles were, whether they were quite considered or you just sort of fell into them. So Rowan, I'll go straight back to you because I know you took a slightly traditional route into your role. Can you tell everyone a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So when I was at school, I remember essentially, like you were saying, thinking, oh, I'd like to be a businessman or like wear a suit and just, I don't know what that entails, but looks quite impressive. But from school and through uni, I really had no idea kind of what a good kind of first step into my career would be. And I did quite a few different bits of work experience, and essentially each of them just made me realize that what I didn't want to do, the thing that I took a look at. Like I'm a big football fan, and I even did a work experience as a football agent, and even that wasn't for me. So I was getting quite concerned that I wasn't going to enjoy anything. and I did an internship, and it was a property focused internship, but I was lucky enough to sit down and chat with kind of the head of the company, and he said to me, well, if you don't have a burning interest in anything, then it's best to start your career where you kind of open doors rather than close them. And so I was told that essentially going down one of three routes. Apologies, Meggie, but I was told either go down the legal routes, the consulting route, or the accountancy route. And by doing that, you'd basically end up with a broad kind of skill set, which could then be applied to something more narrow should you wish to do that. So I took the accountancy route because essentially I like numbers, and I just find it a bit more interesting to me personally. And yeah, that basically meant starting at PwC, doing my chartered accountancy qualification. And I guess the thing I'd probably bring out, which is good about that starting process, is when you go into an organization like that, it's almost like an extension of university, where I started with 60 other people who were just out of university. And I probably can't stress enough how comforting it is to have people in the exact same situation as you, because I had other friends who started their careers, and the people on the desk next to them were like 40 and not very fun. And like when I started, it was really like being at uni but having a salary. And that was really, really helpful. And then more broadly, in terms of actually the career development, it was great because you can end up just being thrown into situations which you probably really shouldn't be, but you learn things really quickly. And I think working for a big organization, there's always a lot of variety, and that was certainly really helpful to me. So I guess I feel like I'm rambling a bit there, but essentially the reason I got into it was, I was told to keep it fairly broad when you start your career, and then from there you can kind of specialize a bit afterwards.
Nice. And Simon, what about you? Obviously, law is quite vocational. Is that something you always had your heart set on as a kid?
No, probably not. But I think so. My dad is a lawyer, so I was probably leaning towards it. It was something I was more familiar with in a way. And in some ways, I wish I'd kind of really done a thorough exercise of thinking, well, what are all the different jobs and careers that people can have when I was looking to study what I was going to study at university or afterwards. But I think I ended up, it's a bit similarly to Rowan. I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do, and I knew that kind of doing a law training contract or even studying law would kind of set me off on a quite a secure footing in a way, and it's something that I initially found interesting. So it wasn't that I always knew that was what I wanted to do. I think in some ways I fell into it. So I was studying law, then I applied for some internships, did the internships, which I enjoyed, and then I was able to get a job through those internships. And it wasn't actually, and to be totally honest, at that moment, I wasn't really thinking, this is exactly what I want to do for my whole life. But equally, I don't think you need to. I think at the time I was so fixated on just getting a job in a good company that I was just aiming for that. I wasn't really thinking about exactly what I wanted to do in the long term. So I'm a bit torn as to whether that was the right thing to do or whether I should have put more thought into it at the time. But I think that's just kind of how it tended to work. It was all quite competitive, and I was pleased to get something.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say you sort of carved that out for yourself. Like you did the thing that you weren't sure about, and now you're doing something quite different. So I think there's something in that.
You don't have to stick with the first thing that you do. But it makes sense to do. If you're really not sure, it's better to not be too niche or specialized too soon.
Yeah, and that brings me neatly on to Meggie, because obviously your job from the outset does sound quite niche and specialized, which it is, but your route there wasn't like straight into geotechnical engineering, was it?
No, so I was always more interested in STEM subjects at school, like maths and science, and particularly physical geography. And that kind of led me on to studying geology at Durham. And and kind of the last few years I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to do next. And I was looking at masters, and then kind of stumbled upon engineering geology masters, which kind of took my fancy. It was kind of a bit of maths applied to geology, and kind of fitted with what I was interested in. So I applied to that, and I also applied to internships as well to kind of cement whether it was the right move for me. And I did a 2-month internship at an engineering consultancy, and it was great. I really enjoyed it, and it gave me a great insight to the industry. And it did cement that it was the right decision to do, which was nice. Yeah, so then I did my master's, and the master's is quite specialised, so it kind of led to a specific job, which is kind of what I wanted, because I kind of like knowing, I kind of like planning and knowing what I'm going to be doing in the next few years, so it kind of worked for me. And yeah, I started as a graduate 4.5 years ago at Sweco, and yeah, I've just been getting more responsibility and independence as an engineer as I go on, which is great.
Cool. And Davina, what about you? What was your route to becoming a consultant?
So I actually, when I was doing my A-levels, didn't do as well as I wanted to, so decided to take a gap year. And I had this kind of huge looming year in front of me, and I ended up applying to Accenture's school leavers program. So between school and university, I went and did 8 months or something on their Horizons development scheme. And there's loads of schemes like this. I think like KPMG does it, Deloitte does it. So I did that for 8 months, and I didn't want to be a consultant. I actually wanted to be a lawyer. But then I did the 8 months. I was traveling every week to like somewhere near Reading, being put up in hotels and getting a nice salary. And I was 18, and all of my friends were doing freshers, which was a really weird experience, but it was really fun and I enjoyed it loads. And after that, when I finished the 8 months, when I was 19, they offered me the job for when I left university. So I got to basically, and I wasn't sure if I was going to take it, but then I kind of got to the end of university and I was like, well, I may as well go and do it for a few years. So that's how I ended up in my consulting job. But what I will say about consulting is it's not one, like as Rowan said it really well, like it's not, it sets you up with the skills that you can go off and do so many different things. Like from my team alone, people have left to work in international development, they've gone to Google, they've gone to Reuters, they've gone to startups. Like it's so vastly ranging what you can be exposed to.
Nice. And so obviously you did this school leavers thing pre-uni. They offered you the job for post-uni. I'm wondering if there are any routes in for people who maybe don't want to go to uni. Is that something Accenture offer?
Yeah, so I think if as part of this school leavers program, if you really impress them, they would hire you into like a different, you wouldn't into a part of the business. Definitely, that's one route in. But we also do have formal apprenticeships. So straight from school, you can go and then you get a technology degree through like a 2 to 4 year process with them, and you're paid straight away. You're not doing intern work at all. Like you're not getting anyone's coffees or doing photocopying or anything like that. Like you're doing proper work and getting a proper qualification and being paid for it.
Nice. And Rowan, is there anything similar at PwC? Are there different, because obviously your trajectory was quite traditional. Are there other ways you could get in?
Yeah, so it's probably kind of a halfway house between what you were just saying there, but there's a program where you, and I've completely forgotten the name of it for the moment, it'll come back to me, but essentially I think Newcastle, Nottingham, Reading unis all have a collaboration with PwC where you spend 3 or 4 years basically doing a flex between university and on-the-job training, where you spend, I think, essentially 9 months at uni and then like 3 months in the office, and then you have summer holidays and stuff. But you across those 3 years, you end up getting an accountancy degree and your chartered accountancy qualification, which for me, I had to do my degree and then spend 3 years getting my qualification afterwards. So essentially everyone who does that comes out 3 years ahead of everyone else. And like Davina was saying there, when you come in to do work, you're absolutely not getting the coffee and stuff. You're like a member of the team, and I've worked with loads of people. It's quite a big program, and I know that PwC is not the only one that does it. I think EY's one, they partner with Durham, I think, and probably a few other unis, and all the big four will have them with various different unis. So I think it's quite like it's really good. I wish I'd known about it at the time, because it kind of propels you in your career, but I also think it makes it a bit more financially viable to kind of go to university, and actually, by the sounds of things, you really enjoy uni because you've got way more money than any student would ever have. So
yeah. You mentioned something which I think is important for people to know, which is if you get a job in an accountancy firm, you will need to do exams. You're not just in a job, you're still doing exams.
Yeah, I should probably actually say, I should, in fact, given you're highlighting that, one thing about those exams as well is that what I'm about to say sounds quite scary, but it shouldn't really be, because if they've hired you, then you're definitely capable of passing the exams. But they do have a policy of if you fail the exams twice in a row, then you get let go. So it can be a bit stressful. And I remember when I did my first set of exams thinking, oh no, it's all over. It's over at the first hurdle. Like, it's not going to go well. But they do set you up with every opportunity to pass, and they do really support you. And they obviously don't want you to be let go, but it's certainly like you quite quickly have a bit more pressure on you than you otherwise would in some other jobs. But equally, when you pass your exams, everyone in the business is like super happy for you and like will take you out for drinks and stuff. So yeah, there is that. That's probably an important thing to know. Yeah.
And Simon, I'm sure we've got lots of people at school and at uni thinking, I want to be a lawyer, but what do I do? What should I be doing now to set myself up? What advice would you be giving them?
So I think the first thing is, I mean, law is quite an academic career in a way. So you always want to try your best to do well at school and university and all that stuff like that. You can't really get away from that. That's something that you want to try and do. But at the same time, I would say there's many different types of lawyers, and I don't just mean in terms of subject areas of family law, business law, etc. I also mean in terms of people's characters. So you don't have to try and be someone that is, the president of the debating society and someone who's doing like this volunteering thing or that. I think the important thing is to do the things that you enjoy ultimately and do them in a proactive way. So, I mean, I think I was ultimately hired. So I went to Linklaters before I was doing this, and I was hired there probably because I probably came across as reasonably well-rounded in a way, and that like I was studying a language as well, so I was spending some time abroad. I was involved with sports. I was involved with just other things that I enjoyed, and I think that came across well. So I wouldn't overthink trying to just fill a CV with things that you're not bothered about, or equally trying to pretend to be someone that you're not, because that will probably end up coming back to bite you. I think I'd also, if you can take time I think one thing to note is that I studied law, but out of about 50 people that joined this company at the same time, probably over 50% of them had studied various other subjects, nothing to do with law, and it wasn't a disadvantage to them when applying to law firms. So I think if you're looking to go into law, you don't have to restrict yourself in any way at all. Actually, you just have to be proactive in your various activities, work hard, and then when it comes to applying for things, you can kind of communicate the type of person that you are, and it may well, and you'll hopefully you apply somewhere that's a good fit for you and your experiences so far.
Yeah, that makes sense. Solid advice. Yeah, go on, Rowan.
I'll just add on to that, because I completely agree. And something ironically about in accountancy was that the people who did accounting at uni struggled when they first joined, because I think it's the case with any business that they certainly will respect that you've got good GCSEs and A levels and maybe a degree and stuff, but essentially they look at you as kind of someone they're going to break down and build up. And so I think the important thing is to show that you're, you know, competent and capable of being a good employee, but ultimately they want to, when they're interviewing you, they'll be wanting to know, okay, is this someone I'd actually enjoy working with? And I saw one of the questions that came up about tips of it getting in. I think, you know, you have to meet certain requirements, but beyond that, I think you have to come across as like somewhat interesting. And I remember, like, I think the way that Simon just described being rounded is really important, because I remember in my examples of when I worked well in a team, it was always like about sports or some kind of something that happened with friends or whatever, because, you know, I don't think anyone's expecting you to have led a team on a project and you set up a company by the time you're out of uni. So I wouldn't put too much pressure on that kind of thing. I just, yeah, make sure you're kind of feel confident in like real life examples that ordinary people go through, but you can kind of articulate in an interesting way.
I think that's such good advice. And one thing in consulting is you often have to do case studies in your interview. So they'll give you a client situation and ask you how to solve it. And at the end of it, they'll ask you kind of like, what have you read about Accenture, or what have you read about Bain or BCG that interests you? And I always try to give examples around. So, for example, I did a lot of drama when I was at school, and we'd done I hadn't gotten in yet. Accenture had done a project with the Royal Shakespeare Company. So I had found that we'd done this project, and I was able to talk about that. And because I was genuinely interested in it, and the relationship that we had with that client, I think it probably came across as a lot more genuine. And there are always ways to do that, whatever part of the business you're whatever career you're pursuing.
Nice, thanks for that, guys.
Sorry, actually, one last thing: always have questions to ask the interviewer. Just even if it's, you know, anything, just shows that you're engaged. So always have at least 1 or 2 questions for them.
And then Meggie, so obviously you studied geology, which is like fairly broad, and then you narrowed yourself down into geotechnical engineering.
Yeah.
Is that something that's typical with engineering in general, that your undergrad might be more broad and then you specialize? Just thinking if there are school kids that are applying for their undergrads who know they want to be engineers, what their options might be.
Yeah, so a lot of university courses are just general engineering, which you can apply to, and then you do 3 years of general, and in your 4th year you can specialize into, I don't know, electrical, mechanical, civil, structural, or whatever you kind of choose over whatever you prefer or take more interest in over those 3 years, which is quite nice, so you don't have to specialize too early.
And quickly, just sorry to interrupt, but for people who are school age who are like, what actually is engineering? How would you, in a nutshell, describe those different branches? Because there might be kids who are like amazing at certain subjects and don't realize that lends itself to engineering.
Okay, so structural engineering is kind of like designing structures. Like it could be bridges, or it's kind of more like the integral structure of buildings or bridges. Mechanical is a bit more kind of engines, cars, broadly speaking. Civil is kind of infrastructure, so roads, buildings, again, kind of just like anything in construction. And electrical is quite broad. It can be again kind of, it's kind of linked to mechanical engineering, so you can be a lot more with like the automotive industry now, all these are coming electric cars and all that. So yeah, it is quite a broad topic, engineering as a whole, but I think you can definitely find, if you're interested in kind of engineering, then you can find something that you can specialize in quite easily.
So if you're someone who at school is really excelling in maths and science, then engineering is a definite possibility for you.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a lot more vocational than doing something like physics or maths as a degree, because then kind of it's harder to know where to go from there. But engineering is kind of very, very vocational, and it can kind of roll into a job quite easily if you are interested in, you know, pursuing that career pathway.
Nice. And now, for just a bit of honesty for all of our attendees, I want to know the thing you like most, but also the worst thing about your job, so people know what they're getting themselves into. Simon, let's start with you.
So I'm going to talk about more like what I was doing originally, like my law firm career. So I think the thing I did not like, and so I might be biased because I did 2 years at this law firm and left because I didn't like it. There's just a bit of background so people can take things with a pinch of salt. I did 2 years thinking I left saying I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. And now I am a lawyer, but just in a different context. And I didn't realize that the thing I didn't like wasn't being a lawyer. It was just the context in which I was working in like a big corporation, and my job satisfaction was quite low. So I think the thing I liked was that, a bit like Rowan said before, when you join a big company, you join with a bunch of other people, similar ages. There's this kind of big community feeling. There's lots of, I would say, there's lots of training. There's perks involved in that. Like there's nice food. There was a gym in the office. Went on some trips. There was good experience. You're paid well considering you've just started your career. The thing I didn't like was ultimately that I wanted, and maybe I was too impatient, but I wanted to be doing things, like important things, and have a seat at the table and be involved from the beginning. But you have to understand, if you're joining a big corporation, especially in a legal career, in a very big law firm, that's unlikely to happen because, people have been there for 5, 10, 20 years. They're going to do all the important stuff. And the person that's just joined is going to be delegated all the stuff that they don't necessarily want to do. So I found that I just was too far down the pecking order, and it just meant that I decided I need to work for a smaller company or start my own company if I want to have that kind of direct involvement at the top end of the business. So I think overall I liked being part of a big company, but for some reasons, but I didn't like it for other reasons. But at the same time, I don't regret having done it because it was a great experience, and it's kind of set me up to have a foundation upon which to make my own choices in the future.
Nice. That was a very well-rounded response. Davina, what about you?
That's the problem. I was quite good at interviews, but it turns out I probably wasn't actually that suitable for the job. I felt I was not pretending to be someone I'm not, but I was basically trying to kind of sell myself too much without actually thinking, well, what do I actually want to do? That I should have given more thought to that.
Yeah. So Davina, consulting, talk to us about the highs and the lows.
Okay, so the best parts about consulting is like every day is different. Maybe not every single day, but like my projects are never longer than 12 weeks. So since I've joined the company 4 years ago, I've worked with like 20 different clients, which works really well for me because I tend to get bored quite easily. Even like we don't have set desks or anything like that because you're traveling so much. We kind of hot desk, which is great for me because I like that kind of variety. Quite different to Simon's experience in law is that you're given a lot of autonomy very junior in your career. So when I was an analyst 2 years in, I was speaking to CHR, like chief HR officers, chief strategy officers, and being given so much responsibility, which is an amazing part of the job. The lows, which actually are not happening at the moment because we're not leaving our houses, is I never really had a lot of control over my travel. So I got to go to some amazing places, but I also had to go to some not very nice places for extended periods of time. But I don't have to worry about that at the moment. So it's fine. But no, in consulting, the hours can be hard, but same as a lot of corporate careers. But one thing I will say that's very different from when I joined, not very different, but they're getting better at like looking after employees' well-being at Accenture. That is, I can't speak for other firms. So yeah, those are kind of my highs and my lows.
Nice. And what about you, Meggie? How's the work-life balance? What's your favorite and least favorite thing?
So part of my job is requires going on site and supervising kind of construction works, just to make sure all things are going smoothly. And that can be in some ways really great because it's a bit of a change of scenery to the office. If the weather's nice and it's summer and everything's going well, it can be a really nice days out and really enjoyable. But then on the flip side, if you're standing on the side of a road in December and it's raining, it can be quite miserable.
With your hard hat on.
Yeah, with all your high vis, you feel like a bit of an idiot, but yeah, it's kind of up and down with that really. But also going back to being on site, it's when you first start, you have to interact a lot with contractors, and it can be quite intimidating at first. But you do get used to it, and you kind of learn how to maybe change the how you act and stuff, which is all part of the development process really.
And quick tangent, but what's your experience been being a woman in engineering?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up actually. Yeah, it's obviously very male dominated. It's probably 10% female, and at first it kind of took me a bit by surprise. I didn't really know how to kind of fit in with the environment, but you get used to it extremely quickly, and it is something that the industry is trying to change. But I think it's it's a slow process, and it'll be a bit of an uphill battle. But it's good to get involved in that kind of thing to try and promote women in engineering, definitely.
Yeah. And what's your favourite thing about the job?
My favourite thing is it requires a lot of logical thinking and planning, and the use of modelling software and programming, which is something that I really like. It's not for everyone, but I find it really interesting. And the industry, I think, there's very clear ways of moving up the ladder and getting promoted, which I think is quite appealing to me, and I think probably to most people. So you can kind of where you're headed, and that it can be upwards as well. So yeah, it's good. Nice.
And Rowan, how about you? What are the highs and lows? And it might be worth mentioning a bit about your time in audit, because that's probably where a few people would be starting.
Yeah, sure. So I'll probably reiterate quite a few of the comments that have already been made. And so, yeah, I guess to give a bit more context, I started in audit and then moved across to transaction services. And a lot of people bag on audit quite a bit. I actually think, I actually really don't think it's that bad.
For people who don't know what audit is.
Okay, so yeah, audit essentially, every listed company and certainly every listed company that you'd see on the London Stock Exchange would need to be audited, which means a set of accountants need to go in and check their financial results and verify that what they're saying is actually true. For example, if a few years ago, Tesco announced a profit of, say for argument's sake, it was 100 million for the quarter. It turned out that it was actually only 75. There's a big issue there because people would have bought or sold shares on the assumption that the profit was 100, and then it turned out it was 75. So basically your auditors are there to make sure that what companies are saying is actually true. A lot of people bag on it because as a job, it's a lot of going in and ticking boxes, and that ultimately was the issue for me after getting my qualification. But I still thought that it was very useful because I got to go into loads of different companies and really understand how companies operate. And if you sit and you basically go to loads of different offices, and even just seeing, you can almost get a sense of how a company will perform based on the culture. And I guess that's linked to what I was going to say is the thing that I enjoy most. So now my current job is very different, and it involves a lot more lateral thinking, but the consistent theme is that I'd say every day I feel mentally engaged, and I just think that it sounds a bit simple, but I feel like I get smarter doing the job, which I get a lot of satisfaction from. That at the end of the day, I feel like, okay, I actually learned something, even if it's something incremental, and the days just kind of go by quite quickly because you're always occupied. I think kind of latching onto some of the other comments, it's important in all of this to acknowledge, and it's hard to really value yourself when you're an individual who's just been at school and uni, and or at least I found that I didn't think, you know, I was particularly special or anything, and the fact that someone was prepared to pay me to do whatever was like incredible. But I think it's important to acknowledge that an employment contract is two ways, and that kind of works in a number of different facets. And it's the thing I would point out is that when you go and work for a big company, it's great for your CV and people think it sounds impressive or whatever, but the big company knows that you're getting that and they'll take something back themselves. And the thing they take back, I think, is basically a bit of your time. And I've never ever been shouted at in my career ever, and I've never been told you can't leave the office because we've got to work or whatever. But people have effective ways of making you essentially feel too bad to leave, so you end up doing like quite long hours on projects, and that can be quite challenging. I think it's one thing I would certainly advise is to have you need to be quite resilient, and there's certain times where you do just have to dig deep and just kind of persevere to get through a section of time, like a particularly hard project or whatever. But I'd kind of flip it back and say, in every project I've been on, and this is another thing that I really enjoy about the job, is you're always working in teams and you've always got that support. So I'd say, just to kind of summarize it, the main thing I really like is the engagement and the mental kind of challenge. Probably the thing I would dislike the most is sometimes the time commitment you have to give in. But I would also say across a 12-month period, it's pretty stable, because I'll have periods where I'm super busy and I have periods where I've got absolutely like nothing on. So, you know, it swings and roundabouts, but I guess the point is you're getting something from them and they're going to take something back from you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I am going to now pass over to Mariota, who is going to field some of the questions that you guys have been posting throughout. If you've got any more, then you can pop them in the Q&A function now, and we'll get through as many as we can.
Yeah, hi guys, thanks for all the questions so far, and thank you Meggie, Davina, Rowan and Simon for all your great answers so far. So we've got loads of questions already. Let's start with a bit of a broad one. If you're at uni and you want to apply for a bunch of internships, how do you decide which ones to apply for? Like, how do you prioritize? How do you know which ones will be more valuable for you? Should we start with Davina, because you spoke a bit about that before?
Yeah, I get that's a really good question, and I think it's quite hard to answer. So when I applied for the gap year internships, I applied to KPMG, Accenture, Deloitte, Rothschild. I applied to so many of them, but I'm so happy I picked Accenture in the end, because I couldn't have survived a day at Rothschild. Like, it wouldn't have worked. So be like really realistic about what you're capable of. Because for me, I cannot do quantitative work. Like, I've learned to do it now at Accenture, like build big financial models and stuff, but going into a purely quantitative job, because that's something that maybe my school or my parents expected of me, just be really, really, really realistic with yourself, with what you're going to enjoy. Because a lot of these internships, they're not short, they're 8, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, sometimes months. And just try and, you know, message people on LinkedIn if you really don't know anything about the job or the industry. Try and reach out to people that you know, or MyTutor, and get a feel for actually what the job is, and not just think about prestige, because you're not going to do well at something that you're bad at. That's my advice.
And do you think it's fine as well if you go and do an internship and you find that that's not the right company for you? Do you think it's still, so say if you had gone to Rothschild and had a terrible summer, do you think you would have still had a chance to go to Accenture as a grad?
Absolutely. I think all experience is good experience. When I was at school, all the work experiences I did were in TV, like being a runner on set for things, but I knew by doing that I definitely didn't want to work in TV, but I was able to talk about it in interviews. So any experience is good experience, and I think learning what you don't want to do is as valuable as learning is what you do want to do.
Yeah, totally. I saw a bit of a knowing nod there from Rowan. Would you have anything to add on the kind of from the more accounting side of how to choose?
Yeah, I just completely echo everything Davina just said there, and I think it's so. I took the approach when I was at uni that I actually only applied to, I only applied to 4 or 5 different places, and they were all a similar kind of thing. And for me, that was better because I could just kind of marshal my thoughts into what answers I'd given in an interview. And I think also the reason I came to that conclusion was I looked at various different jobs, and like I said before, I did quite a lot of different experience, like work experience, doing loads of random things. And it made me realize that I had to consider what could I go and do where I wouldn't be counting down the minutes to lunch and then the minutes to leaving, which I kept finding on work experience. And I think if you approach it that way, you don't waste your time down the line, because you don't want to do a job which you get there and it sounds impressive, but that actually you don't have the capacity or the interest to do. So I'd say it's just really important to kind of have a think about what you'd actually enjoy, but equally don't beat yourself up if you don't enjoy it, because a good decision in the moment, it might be that you don't enjoy it long term, but any experience is good experience. And I think right the way through your career, it's just about how you sell yourself. So I'd really practice as well, kind of speaking out like answers. So sitting in your room, like I spent a load of my final year at uni in my bedroom just talking about myself, rehearsing answers, because I think when you actually hear the way you sound, you realize what sounds convincing and what clearly doesn't. um, and I think I just I saw a question here from Janky who applied to PwC. I can just answer that if helpful.
Yeah, go.
So the exercises were completely there were these really random. I imagine there were those random kind of or patterns which you have to then choose what the next pattern is. Those sorts of tests, they seem quite abstract, and they kind of deliberately are, but they're just there to test I guess kind of how your mind works, and they can be really challenging and very time constrained. I remember finding loads of free resources online when I was at uni, and so I just practiced them loads. And I'm convinced that anyone who practices will pass, because it's not something which many people can do straight off the bat. But if you practice enough, you can get through them, I think. So yeah, they are difficult. I distinctly remember them, and I also remember friends asking other friends to do them for them. So I would definitely not recommend that, because if they get you in, then you'll have a crisis of confidence when you get there and you can't do basic maths.
You'll also find with those games, those like kind of Sims games, that more and more of the corporate organizations are using them as a method to level the playing field. Because before, now like most organizations, when you go in from an inclusion and diversity perspective, no one will be able to see your name or your education. This isn't in every single organization, but in a lot of them. And those games are a way of basically looking at your potential rather than your experience. And I've done them as well, and I've failed lots of them, but they are basically, my message is get used to them, because they are the way that more companies are starting to assess now.
Really, really good advice. Thank you, guys. We've had a couple of questions here on how everything's changed since COVID, and I know we have a kind of potential end of COVID in sight. But I think the first question for Simon, because you're an employer, I know it's a tough one to answer because everything is new, even for employers at the moment. But so, question here from Isaac. If you were to be making recruitment decisions, what sort of thing would you like to see on a CV instead of a gap caused by internships, etc., being cancelled due to COVID? So I'm sure a lot of people will have that sort of decision.
I think what I'd say is if it's a kind of a graduate CV, so someone who's, I think at a graduate level or a school leaver level, you're not expected to have any actual skills, let's say. All you have is your kind of character traits and your attitude. So I suppose you're looking for people, someone who kind of has demonstrated like an enthusiasm to do different things, and not necessarily trying to demonstrate that they know everything. I think a lot of the time, actually, employers are looking for, this isn't, I don't know about me, but I think employers often are looking for enthusiasm coupled with humility. So you have to find that balance between showing that you're really enthusiastic and keen, but you understand that you have like a hell of a lot to learn. That's just the reality of starting out your career. I think if you try and make out to impress someone that you know everything, you will just probably annoy them. You'll turn them the wrong way. But I think in respect of COVID, if I was being harsh, I'd probably say there's like try and, in reality, if you're going for an interview and there's 10 people going for the same job, there's a good chance that at least a couple of them have been kind of found a creative solution to doing something. So I would probably try and like not rely on COVID as an excuse, even if that sounds harsh, to try and use your initiative somehow to come up with, to do something that you're interested in, to make out like, well, during COVID, have you just been at home, watching TV, or have you like watched TV for 3 hours, but then for half an hour you've done something that you're interested in or something else? I would just try and be creative at this point. And I don't think it does any harm to if you had something lined up and it was cancelled, you can always note that somewhere. Obviously it's exceptional circumstances. It's a tough one though, to be honest. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Sorry, not directly linked to that, but just a thought that I'd had was I also wouldn't attach too much weight to the importance of internships. And I say that with an anecdotal example where in my final partner interview, I was asked, I kind of went off on a spiel, kind of selling myself and then talking about like the internships I'd done. And the partner just turned around to me and said, right, have you ever worked a day in your life? Like, have you ever had an actual job? Which fortunately I had, and we talked about that for ages. And he was way more interested in that. And I think I certainly thought that they wanted someone quite polished and someone who would fit a good corporate mold. But I think it's equally as important to show that you've actually got real life experience and that you've got I suppose it's a bit pejorative to say, but just that you're normal. I think just having my job as I was a waiter, and he wanted to talk about that because that's a life experience which is kind of important to have. So yeah,
I would probably echo that. That's what I was thinking. Almost, it's like someone who's had a job which you don't necessarily think is so impressive is probably more impressive than a 2 weeks of work experience or a short internship, because who knows how you got that thing in the first place, and the odds are you probably weren't doing anything that useful during it. Like, if you can show that you are reliable enough to actually hold down a job and deliver on it, and understand that working day lasts from 9 to whatever, that's probably a good start.
Meggie, did you have something to add?
I think for school students, a way to show your enthusiasm and interest would be to do maybe a EPQ or a kind of project, an extended project where you can like really go into detail, something you're interested about, and it looks so good on CVs and in interviews, and it's such a good talking point. So you can either do them with, I think some schools offer them, but you can also find kind of organizations online who run them, and kind of do weekly sessions with you, and kind of it's just a great way to kind of show your enthusiasm for a subject.
Great. So that even in a remote world, there's still a lot that you can do to prove yourself.
Yeah,
I think it's an overarching thing. Very last question: if anyone does have a remote work experience or a remote placement lined up for the summer, because I know most workplaces, I believe, haven't made firm plans to be in person again, what top piece of advice would you give to a recent grad who's going to be both working and working remotely for the first time from what you've experienced? Rowan, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I gave this advice to a former colleague who just started a new job, who's 5 years into her career, and it's who's feeling a bit unconfident, you might struggle to get things right first of all, but I think the most important thing is just to show willing and take notes. I think it's really frustrating when you've got someone who's just started and you've asked them, okay, here's a list of things to do, and then they do half the list and you ask them the other half and they hadn't written it down. So I'd say make notes, and even if you feel like you're not doing particularly well, almost like put on a smile and come back and show that you're willing to learn, because it's hard enough to do your own job and then be the motivator for loads of other people. And that is part of your job, to motivate people who are working for you. But if you can make that person's life easier by being motivated yourself, I think that's really, really important and will earn you a lot of plaudits from the people above you. So yeah, I think it's just showing that willingness to learn and to help.
And people will be sympathetic as well, managers and stuff, they understand how hard it is. So yeah, you won't, you'll have people on your side.
And as Meggie as well, would you have any advice on keeping a work-life balance while you work remotely? I'd quite like to know myself.
I think it's just getting into a routine and kind of sticking with it. And I'm quite lucky. I have like a study where I work, and it's kind of when I leave there, it's the end of the day, so it's quite nice in that respect. But I think there are little things you can build into your routine to kind of make that differentiation between your work day and your personal life. It's just finding the balance, really, like trying to work it out. Yeah.
Having a bit of discipline there.
I think something that's probably important at this point, if you are doing remote internships and this is your kind of first work experience, then you have to bear in mind that if you were doing it in person, this is just life at the moment. But if you were doing it in person, it probably would be more fun. It would be more enjoyable. You'd have more like interpersonal connections with people. You'd be in the office. You'd see more about it. Whereas doing it purely remotely, I don't know exactly what it will be like, but you will ultimately lose some of those benefits. So I think it's important to bear that in mind and not be disheartened or think that this is what working life is necessarily going to be like, just purely sat in front of a screen and not actually going out or seeing people. So I'd probably say, if you can take time, go out for walks, try and disconnect from technology. I was reading an article that I actually shared about saying that technology is so dominant in our lives at the moment that it's negative for your kind of overall life satisfaction. So it's important for just give yourself a break during a long summer internship, sat in front of a laptop, and make sure you're kind of still seeing people and living life as well.
Yeah,
that's great. So sorry, on you go.
So I was just going to add, this is this is probably not a COVID relevant comment, so just something that I got told by people above me is that you always need to be really firm on plans, and ultimately I think it sounds really naff, but making time for your friends and people close to you is incredibly important. And if you don't regularly touch in with people like that, I think you'll struggle to do your day job anyway. I remember there was a woman who I worked for who we were in a team, and there was a girl in our team, and some deadline got moved up, and she said, "Oh, can you guys work late?" And one of them said, "Oh, I had a date planned, but it's fine." And the manager was just like, "Oh no, you never ever cancel a date for work, because you don't want to be married to this place, as in, if nothing else, you want to at least have a partner." And I think we can get quite I don't know, embarrassed about doing things which are really, really important in your life. And I think probably the pandemic showed it loads, as in going to the gym, or going home and just spending time with your dog or something. I don't think you should ever lose sight of how important those things really are. And ultimately, I think if you do lose sight of it, it can actually be quite detrimental to your career in an indirect way.
Really, really good advice. Thank you. So don't cancel those Zoom dates which you've got.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are valuable. I think we'll finish it there. Thank you so much, guys. And back to Emily.
Yeah, thank you so much to our panelists. Davina had a hard stop at 6, which is why she disappeared. But thank you everyone, and to all of our attendees as well. I hope it was useful. And have a great evening, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.